work that I've been doing on virtual meetings, it really was sparked by COVID and sparked by the dramatic shift that we saw across many types of research, but especially research for me on groups and teams and the ways that people collaborate as things moved to a fully virtual mode. And it is abundantly clear now that the heavy reliance on virtual means of collaboration is something that's going to persist long beyond the 2019 time period, far into the future, and will very much be something that is a characteristic of the way that people work into the future. And so abundant evidence, both in terms of anecdotal practices within organizations that have been abandoning their physical infrastructure. I think following where companies invest their money is a good sign of what the future might bring. But also direct research with workers that highlights the fact that some degree, certainly for knowledge-based occupations, working from home is here to stay. And whether that is full-time work from home or some degree of hybrid, folks are going to be interacting and coordinating and collaborating with one another through virtual means long into the future. And so the basic purpose and need behind this work, it stretches back before COVID, as folks were using things like Skype in order to interact with one another, WebEx, for example. But as COVID-19 accelerated this shift, we have a real need for researchers to understand virtual interactions, but also as I think about my work in the classroom with students, I teach primarily courses on teamwork and leadership. We definitely need opportunities to help students develop their virtual collaboration skills. Now, as a researcher, I think there are some incredible positive externalities to developing sound methods and really easy to use tools for analyzing virtual meetings. These meetings can be a wonderful context for studying long-standing research questions. And so my own personal interest in using Zoom-based meetings in order to collect data stemmed from work that I was doing on groups and interpersonal interactions within groups. And I've long been frustrated with a reliance on surveys for analyzing group dynamics because you're inevitably interrupting the group dynamics when you ask people to complete a survey. And so as you think about the ability to collect data less obtrusively into the work of the group using something like Zoom, we can study true flows of activity over time because we have a continuous recording of what's happening within at least that interaction. Similarly, you can think about topics like negotiations and conflict management, generally leadership, how do people lead and influence other people? These virtual interactions can be a very rich source of high resolution data on how people are interacting with one another over the course of time. So hopefully by now, I'm just saying things that you already know to be the case, and that's probably why you've self-selected into this session, is that you see some potential here. And so let me just dive right into the methodological side of things. Here are the things that I hope to accomplish in our time today. We may not get to all of them, but that's okay. We've got time for Q&A, and I also have posted materials online that should provide some additional paths for learning if you happen to be interested. The first place where I'm going to spend some time is on kind of the configuration and process side of things. If there is one thing that I have taken away from work that I've done so far in collecting data with Zoom, it is that a very clear and rigorous process and a lot of work up front in documentation can save you enormous time downstream. And so I want to share some recommendations for how you might configure Zoom for research-based projects, as well as some suggestions for what files you might end up using. And I'll give you a view of some of the ways that I set data sets up so that it makes it easier to collect data at scale across multiple groups, multiple meetings, and using a data set that might have lots of people in it. The second place we'll focus our attention is analyzing language. And so one data stream that we get out of Zoom is language-based. And so I'll share some methods for using R to parse the text-based output that comes from Zoom, including analyses of conversation dynamics and sentiment. And then finally, if we have some time at the end, I will share some tools for processing the video output from Zoom in ways that allow you to identify people and analyze their facial expressions for attributes as well as emotional expressions. So that's where we're heading in our time that we have today. And please do ask questions in these different areas as you have things that come to mind. And so in fact, I'd highlight a few ground rules for this session that'll help you get the most out of it. First, I encourage you, even though we're in the webinar format, please play an active role in the workshop within your own thinking about it. And so I would encourage you to have a notepad up on your screen or a physical notebook out so that you can jot down questions that you raise later, but also so that you can jot down some use cases that you have that come to mind that will help you bring to life how you'd apply whatever I'm presenting within your own research. And I think envisioning whatever the example is in the lens of your own constructs, variables, and research setting will really help you to think about how you might apply these methods in your own work. The last thing I would highlight here is that you can follow along with the code and the examples that I'm sharing. In particular, I'm going to be walking through a tutorial that is live and that is up on the web. It is at zoomgroupstats.org. And so if you have the ability to, and if it wouldn't disrupt your flow, you also could pull up this tutorial, pull up R, and work through the tutorial alongside us. And so by bringing some code up to the screen, you can kind of play with some of the information that's here and use some of the tutorial examples that are there. If you don't, I would encourage you after the session to take a meeting set of your own, download your own files from Zoom, and try to process them. And so you'll find instructions on that tutorial site, zoomgroupstats.org, that'll walk you step by step through how to do that. Okay, let's start diving in on setting up Zoom and extracting your output files. And so there are a couple of things here I want to highlight just at the outset. We can tweak the settings of Zoom, and you should always be thinking about how to change the default settings to maximize your ability to collect the kind of data that you need. The usability of Zoom for research will be enhanced by doing so. And so I want to just highlight here first and foremost that the available options that you have will depend on your Zoom subscription. Most institutional licenses, if you're accessing Zoom through your university, will provide the options that I'll share with you here. However, you may need to upgrade your Zoom license if you're using a personal account so that it gives you the ability to use cloud-based recording. And that's really, I think, the easiest way to collect research with Zoom is using cloud-based recording that leverages Zoom's internal processing of the data so that you're not doing things post hoc, just locally on your own machine. And so that's my first recommendation to you is it's worth the investment. If you do not have a Zoom subscription that gives you cloud-based recording, I would strongly encourage you to fire that up. But let me share just a couple of things that you might think about as you are configuring Zoom. And so I've logged into my Zoom client on the web. And so for us here at Washington University, that's woostel.zoom.us. And I've gone to the settings page here. And so in the settings page, you'll see a tab for recording. And here, of course, a network error. Zoom is going to time out for us. What you'll see on the recording tab is you see options for changing how things are done in the cloud-based recording. Now, it's okay if you can't see the small type here on the screen quite so well if it's fuzzy. I'm going to highlight just a couple of things. First, I tend to check everything when I'm doing research, because these meetings are expensive to hold. You know, if you're paying research participants or if you're drawing from real company time, an hour-long meeting with 5 people, that's 5 people hours. That's a lot of time. And so I always try to get as much as I can in raw data from the very start. And so that includes different video views. I want the active speaker view, the gallery view. I want to see what's being shared on the screen. And Zoom recording will download all of those files separately. And so for a single meeting, you might get up to 8 different files, including multiple camera or video feeds. And so I always check all of those. I want everything that I can get out of Zoom. I also want the audio file. And so I pull down the audio file here, and this is more for a next steps, because the next piece of this R package is analyzing nonverbals that are coming across in the audio feed. And I want that because I'm not going to be able to go back and recreate the meeting. I just want to pull that out at the outset. Also saving all the chat messages, of course, I want to pull that down. And then you'll get to a section that talks about advanced settings for your cloud recording. And here's where you really might want to think about the nature of your study and the questions that you're asking, because that's going to drive the sorts of settings that you select. First of all, adding a timestamp to the recording. Depending on how you're using these data, you might very well want to have that timestamp. So it's just literally the time of day that's stamped on the bottom of each recording feed. Some of the functions that I have will parse that out of the video feed to give you a timestamp on each of your data points. So that can be sometimes helpful for a second check on your timing, which is something I'll mention in just a moment. Display participants' names in the recording. You can ask Zoom to include someone's display name in the lower left-hand side of their video box in the video, or you can remove that. And so as you start thinking about how you're using these data, if you're going to have people, humans, coding information, you might very well want to have the identity attached to an individual's video feed. There are times, though, where you might not want that name that's showing there on the screen. And so you really need to think about how you're going to be using the video feed after the fact. I always check optimize recording for third-party video editor. You get a higher quality video that is an output. And one of the most important boxes to make sure that is checked is create audio transcript. This will automatically create for you a text-based transcript of all of the auditory language that's coming through people's microphones. You could certainly do this after the fact, but it is very easy here to just have Zoom create that. In my experience, it's a pretty good transcription of the audio. And so I would encourage you to do that. No cost to have that here, always useful to have after the fact. Other pieces here, saving closed captions doesn't add too much beyond the transcript, but something that you might want as well. And so just a quick overview of some of these settings. My overall recommendation is to make sure to take time going through these before conducting a research project, but also make sure that you are instructing participants or research assistants, anyone who is involved in recording meetings. You should be making sure that they have clear guidance for configuring Zoom for you. And so I've included in the tutorial that you'll find some examples of exactly how you can give that instruction to people. Sometimes it's useful, for example, to just have a Google Doc that people can use that gives, some specific guidance about what settings they should be clicking. That is critical to make sure that if a team leader, for example, is responsible for the recording, that they actually give you the information that you need to complete your study.